Egypt is a land of wonders. It has a history that spans thousands of years. This history is filled with amazing stories. It's a tale of pharaohs, pyramids, and powerful gods. Egypt's past is like a long, winding river. It flows through time, shaping the world we know today. The story of Egypt is not just about one civilization, it's about many. Each era brought something new. There were times of great power and times of struggle. Through it all, Egypt left its mark on the world. Its art, architecture, and ideas still amaze us. Egypt's history is a journey through time. Let's start our journey through Egypt's incredible past. Long ago, people began to settle in Egypt. This was the pre-dynastic period. It started around 6000 BCE. The Nile River was key to their survival. Its floods made the land rich for farming. People learned to grow crops here. They made their homes along the river banks.
These early Egyptians were clever. They made tools from stone and copper. They created pottery and baskets. They learned to make boats to travel on the Nile. Slowly, their skills grew. They began to form small villages. These villages were the seeds of a great civilization.
During this time, people started to believe in gods. They thought these gods controlled nature. They made small statues to honor them. By the end of this period, Egypt was ready for big changes. Around 3100 BCE, a big change happened. Egypt became one country. This was the start of the early dynastic period.
A king named Narmer united Upper and Lower Egypt. I became the first pharaoh. This was a huge step for Egypt. It meant more power and better organization.
With unification came new ideas. The Egyptians created a system of writing. We call it hieroglyphs. These picture words told stories and kept records. They wrote on papyrus, a paper-like material. They also carved hieroglyphs on stone. This helped preserve their history for thousands of years. The pharaohs of this time built grand tombs. These were called mastabas. They were like big, flat-topped pyramids. The Old Kingdom was about to begin. The Old Kingdom began around 2686 BCE. This was Egypt's first golden age. It's famous for its massive pyramids. The pharaohs wanted to show their power. They built huge tombs that reached to the sky. The Great Pyramid of Giza is from this time. It's one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Building these pyramids was a huge task. It took thousands of workers. They used copper chisels and bronze saws. They dragged huge stone blocks on sleds. Some blocks weighed as much as 15 tons, yet they fit together perfectly. Even today, we're amazed by how they did it. The Old Kingdom wasn't just about pyramids, it was a time of great art too. Sculptors made lifelike statues of pharaohs. Painters decorated tomb walls with colorful scenes. These showed what the Egyptians thought the afterlife would be like. They believed in preserving the body. This led to the practice of mummification. The Old Kingdom lasted about 500 years.
Around 2181 BCE, Egypt entered a troubled time. We call this the First Intermediate Period.
The strong central government fell apart. Egypt split into smaller regions. Each area had its own ruler. These rulers often fought with each other. It was a time of chaos and uncertainty.
There were many reasons for this collapse. The Nile's floods became unpredictable. This led to food shortages. The pharaohs had less power. They couldn't control the whole country anymore. Local governors became more powerful. They started to act like kings in their own areas.
Despite the troubles, this period had some positive sides. Art and culture became more diverse. Local styles developed in different parts of Egypt. In the end, a new family of pharaohs united Egypt again. The Middle Kingdom began around 2055 BCE. It was a time of rebirth for Egypt. The country was united again under strong pharaohs. They brought back order and stability. This period is often called Egypt's classical age. It was a time of great art, literature, and building projects. During this time, Egypt expanded its borders. They took control of Nubia to the south. This brought gold and other riches to Egypt. They also improved trade with other lands. Egyptian goods were sent far and wide. In return, they got exotic materials and new ideas. The Middle Kingdom saw a boom in literature. Many famous Egyptian stories come from this time. One example is the Tale of Sinuhe. It tells of an Egyptian official's adventures in foreign lands. Art and architecture flourished too. The Middle Kingdom lasted about 350 years, but like all things, it too came to an end. Around 1650 BCE, Egypt entered another difficult time. This was the second intermediate period. Once again, the country split apart. But this time there was a new challenge. Foreign rulers took control of part of Egypt. They were called the Hyksos. The Hyksos came from the east. They brought new weapons and tools. They had horses and chariots. These were new to Egypt. At first, the Egyptians couldn't stop them. The Hyksos took over the Nile Delta. They made their capital at Avaris. For about 100 years they ruled Lower Egypt, but the Egyptians didn't give up. They learned from the Hyksos. They adopted their weapons and chariots. The Theban pharaohs finally defeated the Hyksos. This victory united the country once more. The New Kingdom began around 1550 BCE. It was Egypt's greatest age of power. The pharaohs of this time were mighty warriors. They expanded Egypt's borders far and wide. They built huge temples and monuments. This period gave us many of Egypt's most famous pharaohs.
One of these great rulers was me, Hatshepsut. I was a woman who ruled as pharaoh. This was very unusual. I dressed like a man in official art, but I was known for peaceful rule. I built many monuments. One was my beautiful temple at Deir el-Bahri.
Another famous pharaoh was Ramesses II. He ruled for 66 years. He fought great battles and built huge monuments. He made the temple at Abu Simbel. It has giant statues of him carved into a cliff. Ramesses wanted everyone to know how powerful he was. He called himself Ramesses the Great. Around 1069 BCE, Egypt entered the third intermediate period. This was another time of division. The pharaohs lost power. Different groups controlled different parts of Egypt. Some were Libyan, others were from Nubia to the south. Egypt was no longer as strong as before. During this time, the high priests of Amun became very powerful. Amun was Egypt's main god. The priests controlled Thebes and Upper Egypt. They acted almost like kings. This weakened the real pharaohs even more. It was hard for anyone to rule all of Egypt, but not everything was bad. In some ways, Egyptian culture thrived. Local rulers wanted to show their power. They built temples and made beautiful art. Towards the end of this period, new threats appeared. The late period began around 664 BCE. It was a time of ups and downs for Egypt. At first, there was a revival. Strong pharaohs united the country again. They brought back old traditions. They built new monuments. But they also faced new challenges from powerful neighbors. One of these neighbors was Persia. In 525 BCE, the Persian king Cambyses conquered Egypt. This was the first time Egypt was fully controlled by foreigners. The Persians ruled Egypt for over 100 years. They brought new ideas and customs, but many Egyptians resisted their rule. In 404 BCE, Egypt broke free from Persian rule. For about 60 years, Egyptian pharaohs ruled again, but their independence didn't last long. In 343 BCE, the Persians conquered Egypt again. When Alexander the Great died, his empire was divided. One of his generals, Ptolemy, took control of Egypt. This started the Ptolemaic period. It lasted from 305 to 30 BCE. The Ptolemies were Greek, but they ruled as Egyptian pharaohs. They kept many Egyptian traditions. The Ptolemies made Alexandria their capital. It became one of the greatest cities in the world. They built the famous Library of Alexandria there. It was the largest library of the ancient world. Scholars came from far and wide to study there. The Ptolemies also built the Lighthouse of Alexandria. It was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
The most famous Ptolemaic ruler was Cleopatra VII. I was the last active ruler of the Ptolemaic dynasty. I was clever and well-educated. I spoke many languages. I tried to protect Egypt's independence.
When Rome took over Egypt, a new chapter began. Egypt became a Roman province. It was very important to Rome. Egypt's rich farmland provided grain for the Roman Empire. Alexandria remained a great center of learning and trade. Many Romans visited Egypt to see its ancient wonders. The Romans built new temples in Egypt, but they built them in their own style. They also brought their own gods. These mixed with Egyptian gods. This created new forms of worship. Christianity also came to Egypt during Roman times. It spread quickly, especially in Alexandria. In 395 CE, the Roman Empire split in two. Egypt became part of the Eastern Roman Empire. We call this the Byzantine Empire. Greek became the official language. But many people still spoke Coptic, the Egyptian language. In 641 CE, Arab Muslims conquered Egypt. This began the Islamic period of Egyptian history. It brought big changes to Egypt. Arabic became the main language. Islam became the main religion. But this change didn't happen overnight. It took centuries. The Arabs built a new capital city. They called it. The legacy of the pharaohs lived on in art, architecture, and popular beliefs.